Should comic books edit out, problematic parts of their past? This is a weird topic, and it's a tough one to wrap your head around because, in general, my stance is you shouldn't edit out the past. You shouldn't try and kind of whitewash it, clean it up. I understand the term has connotation, but you shouldn't try and do that because you're just erasing history. You increase a chance that you're going to repeat it. But it's not quite that simple. And let me get into a couple examples and ask the question, what do you do? Hey everybody, this is Perch. It's a topic that we're talking about a lot right now for all kinds of media. This idea that, there's things that we did in the past that were considered acceptable back then that today seem really unacceptable or racist. A good example of that probably is the Karl Malone bit that Jimmy Kimmel did in The Man Show, where he put on blackface and talked like Karl Malone in not the most flattering way, I would say, and he did this bit. Now, blackface is offensive, and it isn't something you should do, even if you are a Democrat governor or you are the head of Canada or Jimmy Kimmel. You shouldn't do blackface. I think most people understand this, and most people have understood this for a long time. I remember, and this will date me a little bit, but I remember when the Ted Danson put on blackface to escort Oprah Winfrey. No, it's not Oprah Winfrey. God, how weird would that be? No, Whoopi Goldberg. Ted Danson and Whoopi Goldberg were dating. Ted Danson went in blackface to some kind of party or something. And people were like, ooh, this is really offensive. I wonder if he knew. That was kind of the thing. Does he realize this is offensive? It's like, well, I mean, I'm a nobody, and I realize that's offensive. You shouldn't do that. And that was years and years ago. So, hey, let me know in the comments below if you remember that crazy event. But at any rate, you don't need to tell people that blackface is offensive because, anyone with half a brain knows that. But in comics, and you go back, and again, you can see this with movies, lots of different things. In comics, there have been moments in the past that are, stereotypically racist at best and just super, super, super racist at worst. I mean, a couple examples are, back in the 40s, there was this comic, Young Allies. And this is where Bucky Barnes gets a little squad that were his sidekicks, and they do stuff. They fight crime. And there was a couple different members of the crew. There was Knuckles, and he could fight, I guess. He seemed like I don't know what he was, but anyway, there was Jefferson Worthington Sandervelt, who was a boy inventor. He wore glasses. And there was, Henry Tinkle, who was called Tubby, and he liked to eat. And then you had Whitewash Jones, who could make a harmonica talk. And Whitewash Jones introduces himself as saying, yeah, man, I is also good on the watermelon. And this was a comic that, as you read it, it is racist. I mean, there was no... You can't look at this and go, this is just some harmless fun. No, it's like all the stereotypes. They would make him kind of a buffoon, and it was propaganda. But it's weird. It's weird that this is produced. Now, this is 1941. Now, Marvel's not reprinting this today. And if they were to reprint it, well, they're not going to reprint it under any circumstances. But the question has come up, if we reprinted this today, we'd have to go through and do a lot of editing. And here's where people have an opinion on it. Some people believe it shouldn't be reprinted at all. It should be burned forever and nobody should ever talk about it. Others think it should be reprinted, but it should be edited to be more racially sensitive. It should take out this crazy racism and put in something else in there. And a third group believes, no, it needs to be reprinted just as it was because that's how it was originally intended. And yes, there's racism there, but we should be able to see it. I'm going to make this assumption here, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that there aren't a ton of people who are wanting to buy a 1941 reprint of a comic book because they are Klan members and they are excited about seeing this racist comic. I think the price doesn't work. There's way easier material than going and finding a 1941 reprint of a comic because you're super racist and you want to have racist comics laying around. My guess is the majority of people who'd want to get their hands on this in an unedited fashion simply want unedited original material, because as a collector, you want original material. That's kind of the nature of collecting. And so that's where I think most people are coming from. Now, again, in the comments below, tell me if I'm wrong, but I have a hard time believing that there's all these super racist people out there really itching to get their hands on Young Allies from 1941. I think this is a collector saying, I don't want anything edited, and another group saying you should edit out all the bad stuff. And so if that's the debate, if we're not talking about kind of racism or anything else, then I tend to be on the side of the collectors. I think it's better that we have things in their original state, whether it's paintings from the 16th century or comic books from 41 or whatever happens to be. I didn't like Star Wars when George Lucas came in and changed the things around and made it so that Greedo shot first or the Death Star blew up more fancy or any of that. I like the original in all of its warts. And I tend to feel the same way with comics. Now, that's saying when I read this stuff and I see this stuff, does it make me uncomfortable? I mean, yeah, it's gross. It's not good. And no part of me is like, oh, look at this stuff, haha. Any more than the old Mickey Mouse cartoons when he's getting cooked in Africa. And it's super racist just depictions. I see that stuff and I'm like, oh my God, it's crazy that Disney did something like this. I'm not looking at going, all right, I miss these days. I'm mainly looking at going, wow, this seems really offensive. But I don't want somebody to redraw it to make it fit today. That's just me. But another example, so Captain Marvel. And I'm talking about Shazam Captain Marvel. So back again in the 40s, the time when everything was crazy, Captain Marvel had a character called Steamboat. And Steamboat was drawn different from the other characters in Captain Marvel, with kind of exaggerated black features as I don't know what the right term is, stereotypical for that time period features that really didn't look like black people, but that's how they were drawn. So he worked. Now, some people have said that Steamboat was a actual slave, but I don't think that's true. He worked for Captain Marvel, and by worked he did, seemingly all kinds of random things. He'd clean, and he did all these. He was his close friend. Now, he didn't realize that Billy Batson was Captain Marvel, which is a whole different weird problem, but. Anyway, he was clearly some level of servant, and he would talk like, that Captain Marvel sure am a populous person, though, ain't he, Mr. Billy? I sure will, Mr. Billy. I mean, just very, this was not a good depiction at all. Now, DC is not running out there and reprinting these old Captain Marvel comics. And they're not doing that because, people would get insane if they saw this character like this. So what do you do? Do you go through there and do you redraw Steamboat? Do you never print this again? What do you do? These depictions are offensive, and they do, they are offensive to people. They hurt people. In the sense that, nobody wants this stuff paraded out. At the same time, I have a hard time believing that anyone is going to go out in mass and buy, reprintings of, this American Greatest Comics #2 from 1942. I don't know the people who are doing that. So this whole thing becomes a weird little chicken and egg problem of I don't think it's right to go through and redraw the comic. We can just leave it out of print. Or you can reprint it, but who's buying that reprint? Again, I think it's collectors And I think that's a tiny, tiny number. Now, I may be wrong about this. So again, let me know where I'm wrong in the comments below, but I just don't think there's a lot of people running out to buy The Adventures of Steamboat. Now, if we get a little bit more current, there was the issue in Superman's Girlfriend in the 70s where Lois Lane, gets into a machine and turns herself into a black woman. And she wants to understand the plight of black folk so she could get a Pulitzer. So, she then experiences, racism, and then like the taxis won't pick her up, and she's like, so this is what it means to be black, no taxis. And then it's and even like Superman's a dick about it, where she's trying to get Superman to marry her, and he's like, no thanks. Anyway, so it's what's interesting about that comic is seen as being crazy racist, but then if you read that comic, it's clear to me that the writers and the people creating it were not trying to do stereotypical racist things in the comic. They were, I think, legitimately saying, let's do a story about, Lois Lane seeing what it would be like to live as a black woman. And it's unlike, unlike Above, where we get to whitewashed Jones, who's, good with eating watermelon. You can't go, well, that's an accurate depiction of black people. That one is clearly a negative stereotype. Much like, by the way, the other members of the fat kid and the smart kid and I'm assuming the Irish kid who likes to fight. I mean, it's a way different. I think the Lois Lane issue, while weird and wacky and all kinds of stuff, is not the intent of the people creating this stuff. I think matters quite a bit for me. Now, maybe these time changes other things, but it's a big, I don't know. It's a big mix. But what do you think? How do you weigh in on this issue? Should comics never see print again? Should they redraw? Or should they be printed as original and just damn the consequences? What do you do? And where is exactly that line? Or is there a line? Let me know in the comments below. Interested in your opinions. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. But most importantly, thanks for listening.